So, the starting topic for a class, because you have passed some courses, some of our friends have a little experience, and Mr. Sadeghi is passing a course. So, you won't need basic teachings. In these classes, the teachings that I do are the things that you need, and the strategies of my own, like candlestick, pivot, Fibonacci strategies, trend line strategies, and identifying trend line, ascending, descending, or symmetrical, factorization method, how to open orders, how to put stop loss, take profit, investment management that we consult you about, and we call it market psychology. That makes your fears go away and lets you know how to move. All your learning will be on a real trading account, and we would do trading to see what happens, and the strategies that we teach you will show how the outcome will come out. Today's topic is about trend line. Your first topic is about trend line. You have to do one thing first. Imagine you're behind your chart right now and you're about to analyze. The first thing you have to do is to do the market's elasticity. The market elasticity gets out of Fibonacci and trend line, which is monthly, weekly, daily, and in 4 hours. How is my market elasticity? And the most orders that I am going to open is going to be selling or buying. We can do all this by trend line. And trend line, as you know, has an upward and a downward line. But the things you have learned are default, that have tricks that sometimes in the market where you don't think there is a trend line, it can be drawn with other techniques. In here, the way you look at it, the market's trend is good. And the upper end has some peaks that some are lower than the other. And this one is lower than the other. And in the middle is a trough. In here, I have a few types of trend line. There's a general trend. This one is my general trend. This one is like the middle, the trend line. These two peaks I consider. And the detailed trend line, I connect the last peak to the peak before. So there is 3 trend lines. There's a general one, there's a middle one, and the detailed one. And the middle is in the middle of the waves. Each of my 3 trend lines have a bullish kind of signal. And when we parallel them, they shouldn't break each other. I mean, you can't put this here so they break. I start with the detailed one. I want to see my market process in a monthly period of time. So when I get the last peak, my trend is bullish. And we put its parallel on the bottom in the last peak, and it means that it's downward in the weekly period of time. According to the trend line, we just do a trend line, no candlestick, Fibonacci, or anything else. We just want to get the elasticity. Maybe you say we can draw a peak here and connect it to here, but this is wrong. Look, why this is wrong? Because your trend line was here. Peak 1, peak 2, and the central peak. So there is no break in here. Here, there's a break. So don't fool yourself thinking there's a peak and you put it here. Again, you think there's a peak and you put it here. When there's a trend line, like your last one was here, and there's a break, you know that the trend of your market has gone downward. But except a pullback. What's a pullback? So when your trend line breaks, price goes out and it gets confirmed, the price should get a pullback so it will be on the trend line wall. It's not always going to happen 100%. But usually 80 to 85%, this pullback kind of thing happens that we can obtain by another method. That this pullback is going to happen or not. That it is going to get obtained by pivot. And it doesn't have anything to do with candlestick. So you got it. Don't fool yourselves and say, my trend line is here, or the last one was here or here. And the normal people say that they draw it here and say this is my trend line. But your trend line has broken down once. So this is wrong. My trend line is which one? From up. You should draw it to the next peak. And this is the parallel kind of way. Excuse me. So the trend line that you drew that is downwards breaks down on the first pivot. Right. The first pivot or the first peak. So I get the first peak that gets the first breakdown with our trend line. So in the weekly time period, my elasticity in long run, not in the short run. So when we get it down, it breaks down itself and gets detailed. Mr. Sadeghi, I don't have your voice. You disconnected. So in the weekly time period, my long run is bullish. Whenever you didn't understand, ask. Don't be shy and ask. How many questions is not important. So in the daily time period, we get the elasticity of the daily time period. But what should fix the trend line? One is here. That is weekly time period. So when I put back the weekly trend line, it becomes the daily trend line. It gets the same with the daily one. I have another, but this peak is upper than this one. If the peaks are parallel with each other, you choose the last peak that is in front of its other parallels. But if you see a peak is upper than the other one, you know that there's a trend line. Don't think they're in the same way. You should pay a lot of attention that your peaks are, if they're in the same way and they're in the same direction, like this one and this one, they're in the same direction. So if I want to draw a trend line, I do it from here because this is upper than this one. And that means we have other trend lines as well. That if this trend line breaks, the next price that gets it is here. That causes a strong shock to get to your diagram and your price. So know this, that if your trend line breaks down, the price goes up. With encountering your trend line, the pullback starts from here and again goes down. But we have another trend line. Look at this peak here. If your market process gets here, it shows that the trend line that you've drawn are in the upper side. And it shows that your detailed trend line is about to break. And if it breaks, it will be on the next channel. And it starts to create its trends there. And the breakdown of trend line in the new channel, and so on, the new channel. And if I draw my trend line right, it must be right with my Fibonacci numbers. So whenever you saw your pivot and your Fibonacci numbers don't correspond, and with your trend line doesn't match, know that you have made your analysis wrong. So you have to check it again to see where you went wrong. And we will teach how to factorize in the next classes. In the 4-hour period of time, in here I had a trend line that in this price had a breakdown. That again the price have made itself come down. Only in this range the price was confirmed, but here it broke down and it got rejected and it got inside again. It's because you had another trend line that it happened here. It's because I had another trend lines that made it break here. This range is what I'm talking about. Whenever you see it got rejected twice, know that there is something wrong with your work. So there is a peak that it hasn't had its trend line yet. Here it got rejected, meaning trend line has broken down, its breakdown has been confirmed, it did a pullback and went down. And the reason is because the pivot was really strong, that it didn't let the price go up again. So when it gets close to the trend line and a peak gets created, you go to the detailed trend line quickly and you find out that your trend line was bullish. So you see, did you understand this? How the trend line goes back inside? So we had a central thing. I don't have your voice, Mr. Sadeghi. So know that there was a detailed trend line. We were in the 4-hour time period. I have your voice. Go on. Yes, yes. There is your voice. I wanted to see that if we partly analyze, is there any need to draw all the pivots? Yes, we draw all of them. But when we get the market elasticity, we clear them all and we just keep the two times. One is 4 hour time period and your daily ones. That always should be in your sight. Exactly. I would rather look at the weekly one, and according to the weekly one, if it had a good candlestick, the last candlestick and the one before. Or in your opinion, I should look at the 4 hour time period and the daily one and forget about the rest of them. Look, in the long periods of time, we just want to get the elasticity. We don't talk about trading. The trading time is on 4 hour time period or to 1 hour. Right now we're just getting the elasticity. In the time periods of monthly, weekly and daily, we don't do trading. We just want to get the market elasticity and see how it moves. Like if somewhere I put in the Fibonacci numbers and it gives me a descending signal, I would know that the signal would get my target or not. So we just get the elasticity. The trade is in the 4 hours to 1 hour period. Right now, I have a 4 hour time period and I have a middle trend line. That this pick is the one. We haven't reached the peak. This didn't give us trend line. What does this mean? Meaning it's more descending? No, it should get to the upper wall. When it contacts the upper wall, it falls down. How do I know it's right? From having a pivot in the upper wall's line. This should touch that pivot. How many times have paved this way? It's the third time, right? It's the third time. The first encounter, 80% may pull back. This is my first pivot encounter. 80% pullback. The second time, 50% pullback. The third time, breakdown is about to happen. The third time it breaks down and the pivot blocks it. So don't be like, oh, there's a little bit left to my trend line. Like the peeps are low. Like there's 13 peeps at most. And we get into the selling. This is wrong. Here, yes. Here, this is more than this one. But it was the first encounter. So you should have known that this doesn't reach the wall. So I don't have this part of the market. According to the tools that I used, like Fibonacci and others, I got the buy signal. By the time I got the buy signal, I should try to find pivots in my way. I will teach pivots in the next session. When it is the first encounter, you will know if it's gonna go pull back. So what's left? Factoring the strength of that pivot. That you should do that by candlestick. That if the pivot can block it or it's weak. So it will be breaking down in the first encounter. Look, which time is it? The third time. And if you pay attention to it, from this peak has passed it and is trying to open this one. And with candlesticks, we can easily get the buy signal and get it in the wall. For example, here,
آره من موسمو دارم حرکت میدم میبینین الان آره سرعت جناب صادقی اگه که با گوشی وصل شدین گوشیتون بذارین کنار پنجره که نتتون قوی باشه خب بذارین من سیستم رو از شر در میارم دوباره شر میکنم خب پس ببینین من الان اینجا یک اوردر بایی زدم خب ببینید
look,
اینجا تایم
in the
استارت
4-hour time period,
ترند
I
میاد
have a middle
ببینید شما
trend
اگه
line.
بخواید روند تو پیدا کنید
So when you want to find your trend line, you have to do it by eyes. Don't look at the end and the start of the market.
بیاین با چشم حالت وسط
With
چارت رو
eyes,
نگاه کنید
look at the middle of the chart,
که پیش چیزی که توی ذهنتون میاد نشان
and what
میده
comes to your mind means it's
شما همیشه
descending.
وسط
You
چارت
always look at the middle of the chart,
دستتو تو
and with your
علامت
corner of
بالا
your
رد کنید
eyes, you can see that it's descending.
دستتو از قله های بالا رد
So you
کنید
can draw your trend line from the upper peaks.
پس اینجا من متوجه شدم یه خط سند نزولی داره
So I can see that there's a
اینجا داشتم
descending
صحبت میکردم
trend
که
line.
این آیا به
Will
دیوار
it
بالا
reach the
میاد
upper wall?
یکی پرسیدن که
Mrs.
بله به
Sharifi
نزدیکای
asked
خط
that
سنگ
this
به
is
دیوار بالا
nearly
میخوره
close to the trend line. It still hasn't
آیا
touched it.
احتمالی این
Is
داره
it
که این رو
possible
تست
that it
بکنیم
will touch it or not?
بله
I
پس من
say
شر
yes.
بایم باز کردم حد سودم هم
I
گذاشتم
open the
کنار
buy signal and I
چرا
put my
ببینید
profit take
بهباد
on the
اول به دیوار
upper
نشون
wall.
میده
Why?
بله
Because
بفرمایید
my first encounter was in this region. So I shouldn't just open orders by the trend line. I factor many other things in my mind as well. I did it just to show you that it's correct.
دیواره
The
بهباد
first
اول
encounter's
80 درصد
wall
برگشت
has an
بهباد
80% possibility of
به نفع
pullback. The second one has a
برگشتن
50%
احتمال
possibility of
20
pullback.
درصد احتمال برگشت و دفعه سوم
And the third time is
من چطوری
breakdown.
میتونم از این شکستم فاکتور بگیرم
And how do I
در این
factor this
صورت
breakdown?
کندلستیک
By those
ببینید
candlesticks.
کندلستیک
How do I
من میبینم
get signals by
اینجا
candlesticks?
گرفتم
I see that my new prices candle has surpassed
اومده بالا
the last one
و خودش
and it
اومده
has
تو
opened the
سطح
price
کله
and
اولیه
it leveled
عدد
itself
بهباد
with the first
عدد
and its
پایینیه
strikes are in the upper direction, meaning it wants to
من
open it.
میدونم این
So
خط
I
سنگی
know
بهباد
that
هستش
here my pivot gonna break
دیواره
down and it's
بالا
gonna touch the upper
حرکت پیدا
wall
میکنه و
and
حالت
then it's either gonna break down or fall down,
کندلستیک به دست
that we
میاد
can get that by candlesticks.
جناب صادقی خانم شریفی جان بله یک بای
I will
استاپ
put in
قابل
buy a
دسترسیه که
stop
میدونم شکست
above the
فاکتور
pivot
با
that's breakdown is definite.
تی پی دومه
That makes it the second TP.
خب آیه صادقی شما صدا منو دارین حد ضرر رو بذار من فکر کنم آیه صادقی قطع شدن نه هستن خب ببینید جناب صادقی صدا ما رو دارین خب صدا که با تاخیر میاد ببینید حد ضرر رو من حد سود رو گذاشتم اینجا خب
I put my buy
شما
stop
میتونید
here and
نگاه
on my
کنید
upper wall, and there's a
حد
simple
ضررم
thing
رو
coming out
اینجا
of it.
میذارم
But where do I
نگاه
put my
نگاه
loss
میکنم به
stop?
تایم
I
کندل
look at the
ببینید
timing
تایم
of my
کندل
candle.
ساعت 21
I
و
look at it and
57
it's 9 and
دقیقه
56 minutes PM.
اوکی 21 و 56 دقیقه هست و از
9
تایم
p.m.
کندل 4 ساعته من
And
یک
from my
دقیقه
4-hour candle has
وقتی که
gone
شما
1 or 2 hours.
حد
And it
ضرری
still
که
has
من
2 hours.
قائل
So this
دارم
loss stop that I can
باید
put
زیر
should
کل
be
کندل قبلی که
under
برای من
the last
قضاوت
candle's
تحلیلی باشه
peak.
یعنی میشه چی
So it means here.
ببینید
Look, it is
درسته
true that your loss stop in comparison to your buy stop is
اینو
more.
راحت نه اینو خیلی بد براشون جا افتاده یا
But
اومدن
some
توی
people have
سود
understood it
اومدن
wrongly
توی سود
that
خب باید
buy
بیشتر
stop
حواسشون باشه
must
مثلا
be
همچی چیزی ببینید
more
فرض
than
کنید
the
که یک
loss stop.
تحلیلی
But
میکنید
this is not
یک
correct. We're
تحلیل سود
analyzing,
میکنید
and we should
و
open it by our
ضرر
analysis.
سودم
That doesn't
مثلا
mean
چند
that
حد
if my
ضرر
buy
میکنم
stop
یا
is less
مثلا
than my loss stop,
ضرر
then
خودم
introduce it like it's less.
ما
We're
ببینید وقتی
trading according to our
وقتی
analysis.
ترید میزنید من
Why did I
اینجا
tried
اینو
it here?
میگم
Because this is my definite central point.
و اگر که اینجا
So
بازی
if
بشه
this
ترند
opens,
من عوض شده
my trend
شاید اینجا
changes.
قیمتتون ببینید مثل همین قیمتی که اینجا ایجاد شده
Like the
در خود
price
محدوده
here,
برگشت زده و از این محدوده شروع
it has
کرده
pulled
مثلا بالا
back
رفتن
and
پس شما اگه
then
میومدین
it goes
اردر
up.
نظرتون اینجا میذاشتین
So if you
قیمت
put
بالا
your
رو میزد
loss stop
بعد یه
here
دفعه
and
میرفت
it
رو عقب
suddenly
جلو
went
میرفت
up,
باز
you
حتی
would
میرفت
regret
پایین
that,
میرسید
oh,
بالا
if I put it
من همیشه
higher,
توی سود بودم
I would
بعد
have
شما اگه
profited.
ضررتون
So
بذارید
you've
توی
got to
یک
put your
کندله
loss
قبلی
stop under the
مثلا
last
خب حالا این
peak
کندل
that has
قبلی
been
که میدونید چی
created.
میشه
And what is the
حالا
last
این کندل
candle?
آخر
And
محدوده
that's the
میشه
last
قله
candle is
آخری
the one
دقیقا قله آخری که
is the
برای من به
last
پایان
peak
رسیده
that
به
have
پایان
got me
این
to the
کندل این
end.
قله آخری که در حال شکل‌گیری هست
Not the
نمی‌دونم
peak that is
که
getting
می‌دونم ولی
created.
نقطه‌ای که دیگه
This
اون
is the point
تحلیل
where I
شما
know
درست
my
میشه
analysis is gonna
اون
fail,
تحلیل
or I
شما
analyzed
درست میشه
wrong, or I
وقتی
traded
وقتی
wrong,
مارکت روند
or the
درستی رو
market has
مسیر رو میدونم
changed.
تو این محدوده چرا که اگه
I
قیمت
know that
اومد این
it's gonna
محدوده
be
رو
in this
میدونم مسیر
region
روندم رو
because when
صفره
it gets to this
پس
price, I
اینجا
know it's
مثلا
gonna be
من
descending.
اوردر بای باز کردم
So I know I
الان توی
easily
سود هستم
open the
و
order and
منتظرم
I'm in the
ببینم که چه
profit
اتفاقی
and we
میفته
wait to see what happens.
جان جان خب آره نه توضیحش رو ببینید این آره این ترکیبی که بهتون
This
میگم
combination that I tell you is according to candlestick and
ولی اینجا چون
pivot.
مربوط به خط
But
ترند
here,
هست
it's because it's about trend line,
تعریف شده که چرا اینجا
and
فقط
you
نیومده خط
may
ترند رو
question that
عنوان
why it shouldn't
مثلا
touch it.
گفتن یا اینجا
I
اومده
told you the reason.
قیمت ریخته و دفعه بعدیش
It may have not touched it
اینجا من
and
فقط
the
چیزی
price
که
had
باید
fallen
دقت
down.
بکنم بهتون بگم
And
فقط
the
اینه که
only
اینجا
thing that I can
قیمت
tell you so that you don't
برخورد
confuse it
اول قیمت
is
وقتی که
that
پیوت
the
قبلی
first
قطع میشه
encounter
برخورد اول 80%
will
احتمال
be
برخورد داره
80%
یا
pullback,
برشکسته میشه یا نشکسته
breakdown
بعد
or
بار
not.
دوم
The
50%
second
احتمال
time
تخلیه
will be
سود
50%, and the third time
باز
it's
من
gonna break
توی
down.
آموزهای قدیمم آوردم بهم نشون داده بودم میگفتم توی کتاب دفعه
They say
سوم
in the book it
برگشت
says
قطعیه
the third
نه
time is
درست نیست
definite
ببینید
pullback,
اینجوری
which is
نیست
not
که
correct.
مثلا کتاب نوشته
Don't
کتاب
think
نوشته
that
ولی
what's
خطا
written in
نکنید
the books are
اینجا
always
همه
correct.
خطاتون
Because
مثل
who has written the books? The
ترجماتشون
people
درسته
like us who makes
ولی جزء
mistakes.
ترجمهش یه خطاهایی هم هست خب مثل ماها خودمون هم خطاهایی داریم
We also make
پس
mistakes.
ببینید خیلی راحت اینجا میتونید به تشخیص بدین که آیا این بر اساس روش هایی که در آینده بخوایم یادتون بدیم شکسته میشه یا نه چون
So we
در
can
امروزی
easily
مثلا
find
وقتی
out
که این
if
قیمت تا
this
اینجا باز
gonna
میکنه
break down or
من
not.
اوردر بایی زدم و
How I
همچنان
find
دارم
out the price is gonna open and I bought my order
تحلیلش رو
and then
میکنم
put my buy stop here. And how did I know that it's gonna hit it?
از روی همین
It's
داستانی
from the
که پیوت من که
pivots
تقریبا در
pullbacks
قیمتا شکسته بود
and its breakdown.
بعد ببینید
Look, when I see the market, I see that there's a trend line from the market.
دو تا مارکت دارم یکی میشده این
One is this one.
دوباره میانش رو بخوام بگیرم
If
میشه
I
این
want to get the middle of it, is this.
که اینجا به من نشون داده که روند
That
من
it shows me that
روند
my
من
trend
بالا شده در
is
میانه
ascending.
در میانه روند من
In the
بالا
middle,
شده
it's ascending.
وقتی هم نگاه کنید
And when you look at it,
یک حالت مثلث
you see
درسته
that there's a kind of a
به این
triangle
میگیم
creating.
ترانزیت وول
We call it the
پس
wolf analysis.
جان نقص روند چی؟
Breaking the descending trend with a higher base, but our base is higher than before.
خب یعنی شما همون حالت
So
خط
that
تنش رو داره
means
دیگه.
the
همین
trend line that creates.
خط تنشی که
The
داره
thing that you say is the trend line that creates.
آره آره این زیاد مثلا
It
ملاک
isn't really based on
مهمه،
this.
چون که ما داریم
Because we
میفهمیم
know
کجاها
our
مثلا بالا
peaks
خط
end in a
تنش
higher
داریم
level,
بندی
we have a
خط
trend
تنش
line.
رو داریم دیگه. پس خط تنشش رو
So we
حذف
can draw
میکنیم.
the trend line.
ولی وقتی ببینیم اینجا یه حالتی
But when we
ایجاد شده،
see that there's
حالا این
something
چند
getting
ماهه که
created, that there's like a
بدون
triangle
دلیل
creating, we call it
ما میتونیم
wolf
بگیم بر چه
analysis.
اساسی برای
Wolf
این
analysis will be taught later.
زمانی که روند شما
When your
رایت باشه،
trend
یعنی حالت
is
روند نیوترال
neutral,
باشه، یا اینکه
or
مثلا
like
توی یک مسیر مستقیم
it,
داره حرکت
it's
میکنه،
moving in a straight line
موج نمیسازه، موج
and it doesn't make
آدم
waves.
ادامه دهنده نیست، از
They're
این
not
حالت
long
ما
run
استفاده میکنیم.
or
همین که
continuous.
قله های
In
پایینی
wolf
که وجود
analysis, the
داشته
upper peaks
و
connect to each
قله های
other
پایین هم
and the
همینطور
bottom
هست.
peaks
این
connect to
موازی
each other.
شده
They
دیگه.
do not
این
parallel.
بالا رو بیام موازیش بگم در سمت پایین، که در صورتی که این در تحلیل بورد هر از خط ترنداش شکسته
And
بشه،
if any of the trend lines breaks in the wolf analysis, the trend continues moving in the same direction. Right now, all I'm saying is that there is a trend line we have on the market side. And if I want to go in detail, this is my trend line. This is my trend line in details in 1 hour period of time. Right now, according to this position, can I get a selling? Like if the trend line breaks, I make a selling. This trend line or this trend line? The bottom one. If the bottom one breaks, you should have a factor of finding out where the pivot on the way is. It's not like if the bottom one breaks and a little bit later, like here, and if it breaks here and it goes back up and it kind of get rejected, you should factor your pivots. If on the way I didn't have any pivots and in the long run I didn't have any pivots, I could easily go to the selling. But if the trend line breaks and I have a pivot, I shouldn't do it because the pullback may happen to the price. You see here that my price didn't reach my trend line. It got close, but it got a pullback. It's because I had a pivot in my way. And where is my pivot? Here. Here was the pivot that I had and it got a pullback. So I definitely had a peak before. So I could, for short run trading, I could make a selling. But here we are going to get our signals, not trade. And if the price gets down a bit, there's nothing to worry about. It gets back up and we'll touch it, and the breakage possibility is high because our trend in the middle and the short run has made its warnings, and the bearish line has become into a bullish one. So the possibility of the breakage of our trend line is more than 50%. So there's nothing to worry about. It gets down, then it goes back up, and it will touch your buy stop. Excuse me, this descending candle that has been created,
یا هم
how much could it
هم
go
فرض
down
بزنیم.
until they overlap?
ببینید یه زمانی میتونیم بگیم بسته بشه که مقاومت نداشته باشه، ولی این
It will
اتفاق نمیفته.
close when there is no resilience.
و
But
همچنین
you
در
have
حالت
resilience
پیوت داریم. پیوت
because you have a
یعنی
pivot.
این مقاومت میکنه،
Because
همونجوری
pivot
به سمت
is
پایین میره.
resilient to the price.
پس باید بر اساس پیوتاتون فاکتور بگیرید.
So you should factor your pivot
در
and
کل
then
بار
close
معامله‌ای
it.
که
If you
باهاتون
open a trade or do an analysis and you want to know how it will move and when will it pull back, you can do it just by pivots.
متوجه شدیم؟ بله.
In the books they say if the descending candle is under the ascending candle, then it's descending. Well, in that case, you shouldn't have any pivots in your way, and your candle opens the price. Sometimes in the market, your candle has opened the price. There's a price, there's a new candle, but in close nearby, you have a strong pivot, so it may go up a bit. The time that you can for sure say it's a descending candle, you don't see a pivot in its way or close by. It's the pivots that tell the trends how to move.
اوکی جان آیه صادقی شما یه سوالی پرسیدین. جان بله اون تو
In the
جلسه
pivotology sessions, it will be taught
آزمایشی میشه کدوم پیوتا قوی هستن
that which one of pivots are strong, that we can break them.
حالت خط ترن هست
But because our topic is about trend line, we just do trend line.
فقط دلایلی که قیمت داره برگشت میزنه
But the reasons that the price pullbacks and the things that happen because we opened an order and it was profitable because our reasoning was correct. It's all was because pivot. But you should always keep in mind that your trend that are in long run and short run are going up when it falls or breaks down. Don't forget that your trend line is not ascending, it's descending. You should always pay attention to these. In these ways that I trade and I analyze, I always repeat that these trend lines are ascending. So I shouldn't, by some candlesticks, say that my trend line is descending. This trend line that you've drawn, and you found out that the trend is changing into an ascending trend. So, in result, when our trend is ascending, if in our way our price gets to a pivot or anything else, and for a moment it's descending, but because our trend line is ascending, we should consider it. Yes, exactly. But just because we're teaching you the trend line techniques, you legally cannot do orders just because of trend line. I teach you each one of the techniques and then we do orders. It's because I'm repeating the other techniques in my mind. With this technique of trend line, you can say that trend line is 30% confirmation, Fibonacci 30%, and the candlesticks have 30% of confirmation. then you can have a strong analysis.
آره داره ضبط میشه. نه داره ضبط میشه، مشکلی نه. ببینید آره خواهش کنم. ببینید زمانی حالا این
Well,
نبوده که
there's a reason why they overlapped.
برمیگرده باز به کندل
That it
استیک.
comes back to the
زمانی که این
candlesticks. So when a
کندل حالا
candlestick,
چه افزایشی چه کاهشی
ascending or descending, with a
تصادف
long body and without any shadows, or
داشته باشه
minimal
و به
shadows,
پیوت پایان برسه، کندل
gets
بعدی
ended in the pivot, the next move you should do is
داریم
overlapping.
در مورد خط ترند حرف
We're
میزنیم.
just
در واقع
talking about trend
اگر
line.
بهتون بگم تو این دفعه
I'll just tell you the reason so you don't
طرف
confuse,
اصلا
like
خط ترند
why the
و
trend line is going up but it did the pullback.
نمیاد.
The price
این
doesn't
خط
always go
برگشت خط
up.
برگشت خط برگشت تا به خودش
So
به
it
خط
goes
پایان
up and
برسه.
down, up and down, up and down
حالا اینم
until
که
it gets
زدیم
steady.
کندل استیک که از کجا من قبل اینکه کندلم
And it
شروع
gets to the
بشه
topic of
بزنه
candlesticks.
متوجه
But
میشیم
before it
که
starts working, we can say it's continuous or overlapping or descending or anything else.
خب پس اینجا من در
So
تایم
here,
اضافه
in my short period of time and the middle period of time,
افزایشی
my trend is ascending. But in my way,
پیوت دارم.
I have
باید
pivots.
حواسم باشه
So I should
اینجا دیگه وارد بایی نشم.
consider that
مثال
don't
اگر میخوام
get into buying. If I want to risk anything, before factoring anything else, there's
بالاترش
more
بالاتر
of selling factors.
حد ضرر رو باید بگیرم
So
و در
above the
کل
line that makes the break,
ترند
you
معمولا
should
ازش
put the loss
در
stop.
پیوت
Like when the
پیشرفت
trend line
میکنیم
breaks or the pivot also breaks, there's 2 or 3 factors here that gets failed. We can say there's a bullish trend going on,
یه اوردر
so we can have
استثنایی من میتونم با
a
استفاده از
strong buying order
اینکه دو سه تا اسباب کارا
because 2 or 3 of factors have failed in here. Trend line had a breakdown, pivots had a breakdown,
سیگنال
the
داده
candlestick had signaled,
اختیار راحت میتونیم اینجا
so we
وارد
can
بای بشیم و
easily do a buying
تحلیلات دیگه حد سودش رو بگیریم.
and we get a
حق
profit.
ندارید
You don't have the right
این حد
that if you
زمانی من
put
کمی
your
بیشتر گذاشتم
loss
حق
stop a little bit lower, you shouldn't do buying order because every moment has a possibility of a pullback of price. You can do a buying order only when these factors have been failed
و خط ترند پیوتات و
and your
کندل‌ها
trend line and your pivots and your candlesticks
وارد بشیم.
has signaled your buying.
جان
Candlestick, just by passing the pivot and trend line, should always be close to get a confirmation, right?
حالا شما یاد گرفتید
Legally, by
باید
the books,
خارج از خط ترند
yes,
تشکیل
the
بشه
candlestick should be
وقتی به پایان
created
برسه یعنی میشه
out of the trend
سهام
line,
بهتره.
meaning you do the
خیلی خوب
trade with the third candle.
شما میتونید میگی کندل دوم
But
شروع
maybe the second candle's swing is so much that we lose a lot of pips and a lot of distance.
کجا زودتر متوجه
So, how do we
حالا این بخواد
know sooner
ما تاییدیه بده
if the second candle could get us a confirmation
خط ترند رو کامل شکسته
that the trend line is completely broken down
فقط و فقط دو تا
and
تکنیک
it won't be pulled back?
کندل استیک و
And
پیوت
there's 2 techniques,
تمام
candlestick and pivot.
دارم میگن کندل استیک و پیوت
In all of the topics, I say candlestick and pivot.
بگیریم حرفه‌ای یاد
But because if you learn candlestick and pivot, you have gotten 80 to 90% of the market. You can easily just eye the trading.
خیلی قوی
And these two are really strong. In all the analyses, they're useful. So in our teaching journey, you'll understand how it works that before the candle gets created and the price will move anywhere, I predict it sooner and open orders by it, and I'll know when to get out. In these lives, I will teach them all.
پس خط ترند شما اینجا کاملا متوجه شدید جریان چی هست. ببینید یک مورد خط ترند این چون اینا سوالی که
You don't
نداره.
have any questions, right? Okay.
ببینید یک روش خط ترند دیگه ای داریم.
We have another technique of trend line.
مثلا بذارید روندی پیدا کنه.
Let me find the trend.
بفهم.
For the newcomers, which currency pair do you suggest? The major pairs. If they're a rookie or even if they're a professional, the major pairs.
تا اینجا ما در
Like
ارزش
here,
9 آوردیم
I brought the major pairs. Oil is also among them.
ولی اینا
But
ارزش
these currencies are the major ones that technically they gets done well on them. And you can easily predict them and it will give you the number of pips that you want. And the market can easily give you 50 pips or like more than 50 pips.
50 پیپ بهتون میده راحت. ولی خب شما وقتی بیاید روی ارزهای
When you
مثلا
consider the currencies like euro to pound or euro to yen
یورو به فرانک
or euro to franc,
این 90
if you trade on them, their swing is imbalanced.
فیبوناچی رو درست
The Fibonacci are not correct. The trend lines are not correct.
باعث میشه شما رو به خطا
And it makes you make mistakes.
متوجه شدین؟ باش. ببینید یک مدل ما داریم خط ترنت دارم دنبال
There's a
خط
trend line that I'm looking for the trend.
مثلا ببینید اینجا
Like look here,
شما بودین که یه خط ترنت از
you would connect this to this.
مال گذشته
It was from the past. And it would break.
و شکست ایجاد بشه خب
When the trend line breakdowns, don't fool yourself and go to the next and so on.
ببینید یا این روند وقتی
You
وجود
should
داره
see when the trend is
حالت
upwards
میشه
and you have a trend line like this, it's a detailed trend.
روند جزء یه خط ترنت هم که داریم میشه روند میانه
And there's a trend line that is your middle line. And there's a trend line. I see that my peaks are higher than each other, one after another. It's an ascending trend line. When the trend is ascending, the rule is to draw the trend line from the bottom. But when I see here that the trend line is ascending and my peaks are higher than each other, I do a trick and I draw my trend line from the top. When I draw it on the top, I get the price. I will know that this candlestick that is going up, where will it come down? And I can easily here open and buy an order. Like here, I open and buy an order, and then I put my take profit here.
اینجا متوجه شدین چرا این کار کردم؟ ببینید
We should consider our pivots. But if there's no pivot, the first point is trend line that may hit and come back. Exactly. There was no pivots in its way.
داره اینه
The only pivot that it has is this.
ولی وقتی که ببینید
But if you see that a price is really close,
حتی یک ذره میلیمتری
and
ارزش داره
maybe by millimeters is passing it, know that it's gonna break. A pivot that is strong, when a price reaches a strong pivot, it gets in a shock and pulls back. This is a strong pivot.
خب ببینید پس اینجا من اومدم خط
So here I drew my trend line in another way. In here I can draw it like this as well. Look, this is a descending trend. I'm not talking about the market right now. From here to here. Like the last one was this,
تبریش
and the last one was again this. that I can put the parallel on the top. And if you see here, well, it seems a bit bad here. The line that I put here, when it pulls back, look here, it drops down, it has a shadow and rejected it, and then drop down again. With this method, you can get the close pivot to the trend line, that where it's gonna pull back. Maybe even Fibonacci don't work there. Maybe it confuses you that it will exactly hit here or not. According to your trend line, you can get it, and here you must exit. And when the price gets here, you know it has a pullback. And if we get a confirmation, this is where we exactly have a pivot. So this confirms it, that the price will pull back. I will open another chart for you. Like here, the same has happened. Look, after hitting the trend line, it has rejected, then again dropped down. It was a descending trend, and here it went up a bit, and I should have drawn my trend line like this. Like legally, it should have been like this. When the price is close to the top walls, or like a peak, I can obtain how it will move or which direction it will move by this. But another chart, exactly, we should get them by the pivot. Look here, exactly see, when I draw this trend line and hit it to this wall, look how fitted it is, and here it starts to break. You see? In this case though, my trend line was ascending. If I wanted to do it by rule, I should have drawn it in the bottom. But if you see here, we can get the pulled back price according to the trend line. That in the end, we make these all each other's factor. So the rule of trend line is like this. This, this. Look, the first trend line that I had is this. That this angle is this. And there's another trend line in this region. But this candle has started to drop down. I can say that I didn't have this region before. So how can I draw the trend line when I didn't have this? And how should I know that this candle should have dropped down? But not dropped down this hard. You had a trend line that was ascending, that it broke down. One was here, and one was here. This for you has broken down. So you know that it's not ascending, it's descending. Look, I should draw it for you. Look here. I have a trend line here. But there's a peak in here. So I want to get for you, when will it pull back?
ببینید
But this one is for the beginning of our present.
ببینید اینجا خیلی اینا رو از چشم
Look
می‌کنید.
here, so many people don't see this.
مرکز
That from the center and on,
بالاتر رفته باشه.
the peak has a little drop down.
هیچ وقت
Don't
اکسپنده.
ever overlook this. This is the maximum extent that the price wants to
اگر حواستون
reach the trend line.
خط ترند رو بزنید
Like if you draw this trend line
این راهش شکسته شد.
and the trend line has broken down in the way,
دیگه این می‌زنید
and you draw another one
شکسته شد.
and see that it breaks down again. So which trend line should I perform? I should perform on the general trend line,
بعد از مرکز
or the peak after the center on the upper end has been closed.
این خیلی مهمه. این
This is really important. Look, I connected this to here.
من اینجا رو نداشتم.
I didn't have this before.
بعد زده و
So this price, I've touched it and has went back up again. So you connected the bottom pivot to the next and then you continued. Exactly. So you didn't connect it to the front one.
با جلوی مغز کدومه؟ من
You mean which one? There's two of them. This one? No. The one at the end. This one.
زدم به اینجا.
I connected this to here. So you mean we should consider the bottom one and then connect it to the one on the top. So it would be correct. In my way, there is many trend lines. You can never draw a line and say that you have a trend line.
من اصلا اینجا مارکت
Here, I didn't even have the market. Like here on end, I don't even have the market.
من وقتی دارم خط ترند می‌زنم تمام
When I'm drawing the trend line,
راهمو رفتیم.
I draw all the trend lines on my way.
این معدوده پایین
Like the first one with this on the bottom,
بعدش دوباره
and the next one was the next peak, and the next one was on the next peak. And my detailed trend signals that my trend has broken down. Look, there's a detailed one here as well. When there, it signaled that the trend line has been broken down, the exit candle has been created, and your pivot has broken down. So I know that this trend is descending. But in my way, I have another trend line, right? Is this region. It hit it here, had a little pullback, meaning I drew my trend line correctly. And here it exited, and the breakdown was confirmed, had a pullback, and again here it broke down. When the trend breaks down, look, there's 3 trend lines from the center. When each of them breaks, means the full confirmation of the descending trend. It's almost in the middle. This is the confirmation. That your trend line was from the center, it is a general. So when you draw a trend line, and you draw the middle and the detailed one as well, and each of them breaks, it's a full confirmation your ascending line has turned into a descending one. So when it wants to go back up, to draw it from the top, or we should draw it according to the pivot. We should draw it according to the Fibonacci. Fibonacci will be from the peak that has dropped. Keep in mind that I'm telling you the detailed Fibonacci. And we had a Fibonacci here, but by one rule, we can know if there is a Fibonacci or not. And that is by candlesticks. That in next sessions we will teach you. First step is to learn your trend line. Get the elasticity, and when you get the market elasticity, you should see how long will it go. So when you open a trade, you should see where to put take profit and your stop loss. I want to get confirmation that it will be executed or not. You start to get confirmation one by one from trend line, Fibonacci, pivot, candlestick, and so on. So we easily got this trend line, right? Then we have a trend line here. One was here, and one was here, and one was here. And if my price wants to go back up, you should pay attention to the upper walls. Yes, I'm moving my mouse. Can't you see? Mr. Sadeghi, I'm moving the mouse. Okay, wait a minute. Can you ask your questions again?
یعنی چی؟ یعنی خط زن آها آره 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 متوجه شدم.
Like when we draw the bottom trend line. But if it breaks and get close to the bottom trend line, yes, it's true. But in general, you should draw all your trend lines. Ascending or descending, you should draw all of them. You see, the more accurate that you draw, it's better for your order. It will bring down your errors. But generally, when I want to draw it, I draw all my trend lines. Because my peaks has ended higher than each other, I draw my trend line. But if they were created lower than this trend, I would just do the parallel. Here you have a special trend. Your next peaks have ended lower than your central peak. And in the bottom, your peaks have been higher than your last peak. That it shows that we call it the wolf analysis. It's wolf analysis for neutral and side trend lines. Because the side trend lines are the only trend lines that no analysis except for candlestick and wolf would operate on them. You can just obtain your trend according to the wolf analysis. If any of your upper walls break down, the trend moves in that direction. This rule is not definite. Like the wall 1 is on the bottom, wall 2 is on top, and the third wall is on the bottom. Hit each one of them and there's 3 strikes. If it breaks, yes. Look, the thing that is in the book is that on the walls we had 3 strikes. And then the most strikes were for which one of them. And which one of them have the more possibility of breaking. That itself says that it's a possibility. In the book, they teach you the default way of things. It can't tell you the details. Or the one who wrote the book maybe overlooked so many points. But we get some factors that if the third wall was striked, what my candlestick signaled. Does it want to break the wall right now? Or does it want to go down again? These are all factors. When you learn candlestick and pivot, you would easily understand what I'm saying. In the next session, I will show this technique on the trend line. The technique that we say if we can get errors from it, your account will be charged $1,000. The next session, your topic of trend line will end. And the next topic is the candlestick.
سوالی نداریم؟ خسته نباش. من یه دونه از این کلیپ چون قرار شدش از هر کلاسایی که برگزار میکنم
I will send you a video of this, of the recording of the class.
همین ویدیو هم توی گروه میذارم. البته فکر کنم باید حجمش رو بیارم پایین چون کیفیت بالا داره ضبط میشه. میارم توی گروه میذارم. از توی گروه ورش داریم ولی بقیه کلیپ ها ارسال نمیشه که حق شما ضایع نشه. اگه سوالی نیستش خسته نباشید بگید. نه حجمش منظورم کیفیتش رو یه ذره میاره پایین. اون حجمش پایین نیستش بچینیم حالت کات بکنیم ازش. حالا باز نگاه میکنم ببینم حجمش چقدر. اگه زیاد بالا نباشه حالت کیفیت اصلی رو ارسال میکنم. بفرمایید. صدا چون با تأخیر میاد خانم شریفی یه خورده تداخل ایجاد میشه. شما بفرمایید خانم شریفی، شما بفرمایید. ببینین من به نوع خودم اصلا فاند رو چک نمی کنم و نگاه اصلا نمی کنم. شما هیچ وقت ندید من تو گروه مثلا بیام بگم ساعت فلان مثلا خبر داریم. شما اگه تکنیکالتون من همیشه میگم 80
I always say 80% to 90% is technical,
بقیهش مثلا فانده.
and the rest is fundamental.
فاندامنتال شما چه زمانی
You have to see when your fundamental will be announced. It will be announced when it encounters a strong or nearly strong pivot. So, in the trend, that in the way there is no pivots, you have no news. You can check it. When your price encounters a pivot, that's when we have news. This news makes my pivot either break or pull back. This news makes my pivot either break or not break. And then again, we get a confirmation from candlestick. I don't teach fundamentals, and I don't check it either. With my own techniques, I get my news sooner. Because your analysis is so strong, you know when news is going to be announced, makes the news negative or makes your price go down.
آموزش میدیم مثلا تو خبر قبل خبر اعلام بشه بهتون میگن این خبر باعث میشه این قیمت مثلا یه ریزش بکنه یا افزایش بکنه. نه ما حد اکثر 20 از اون حدود میشه معمولا بازارتون از اون بین 18 تا 20 دوباره یه خورده جون میگیره. آره ببینید خود تعطیلات مارکت بکنم تا 5 بیشتر نباشه. البته پارت یعنی پارت تعطیلی داریم ولی خب جون گرفتن و روال عادیش افتادن بین همون معمولا 18 تا 20 میشه. این هر سال همیشه همینجوره. یعنی توی این 15 سالی که ما دارم ترید میکنم اینا رو مثلا چکشون کردم دیدم به این صورت. ولی برای معاملات اصفایی میکنم برای معاملات اسکلپ خوبه چون که بازارتون تو پیوت قدرت نداره. تو پیوت ها همیشه شروع میکنه مثلا یه پیوت ضعیف هم باعث برگشتش میشه. چون روندتون مثلا حالت رونده میانه تو سایده که پیوت یعنی معاملات کوتاه مدت اسکلپتون اساس کندلستیک خوبه میشه گرفت. خواهش می‌کنم. بفرمایید جناب صادقی.
میگم این ها رو با فرمودین گروه رو من فکر نکنم عضو گروه باشه.
نیست، این لینکشو براتون میفرستم.
بعد من خودم حالا بعدی چی برای خودم جداگانه
آره جداگانه ارسال میکنم.
ولی این حال پس لینک برای داده که تلگرام دیگه درسته؟
بله بله تو تلگرامه و هر کسی هم که بدون ویدیوهای بعد و بخواد بدون تعارف بهشون نمیدیم، چرا که حق شما ضایع میشه و من روی این مواردها خیلی حساسم. بابت این خیالت راحت باشه. معمولا میگم 5 جلسه 10 جلسه یک بار من ویدیوهای آموزشی که میبینم مثلا نکات خوبی شما سوال پرسیدین من مفید بوده رو میذارم برای بچه ها که قرار نباشه مثلا خدا خوش نمیاد برن هزینه‌های 7 میلیونی 10 میلیونی رو بدن بابت آموزشگاه که یه چیز حالت عادی و دیفالت آموزش بدن که در نهایت هم برن توی بازار ضرر بدن.
جلسه ما فردا شنبه؟
نه دوشنبه چهارشنبه جمعه. خواهش میکنم. جان صادقی سوالی نیست. بله